going to be in Revelation chapter 6. I will read that, starting in verse 12. And I looked when the Lamb broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Then the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave and free man, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, "Fall on us, and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of the wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" There's the passage. Not the kind of passage you want in the terms of what you would call encouragement or joy. I'm going to open with a dream I had. I typically don't share my dreams. This one was memorable 2 days ago. And the reason I remember it is it was so doggone long. I mean, your dreams, if you remember anything, it's like one big event, the explosion, or you're running through the swamp and the monster's right behind you. Well, this was what I call a nightmare, and it dealt with church. And of course, when I use that together, there's a whole lot of things that could come up. But I'll tell you what happened. It was Parkhill Community Church, and Kathy and I decided that we would not meet in here, that we would meet outside. And somehow, you know, in a dream, it transitions from outside into a house, and so we were in a house. And people were there. Parkhill was there, and then I saw Ed and Connie come, and I said, okay, those are some of the new ones. And then I saw another family come, and I didn't recognize them. And pretty soon I looked, and it was like, you know, there's literally 100 people or more showing up, and then there was a plethora of children. And yeah. So you can imagine my consternation as, you know, the living room got filled, and then the kitchen, and then a bedroom, and then I'm realizing, how in the world am I going to preach? If I stand in the hallway, then the people in the back bedroom aren't going to hear, so I'm going to have to walk around and yell. And then I realized that my notes, I didn't have my notes. And so I asked my dad, who's been dead for 19 years, where they were. And he said, they're in the truck. And I looked down over the hill, and there was the truck parked down there, and the road was that way and back. It would take a half an hour to walk down to it and get my notes. I said, well, then I'll just preach from my Bible. Well, I put my Bible down on the table, and somebody moved the table. So I said, well, this is Parkhill Church. How many Bibles do we have? We have lots of Bibles down there. If you're missing one, just go get one off the shelf. You can even keep it if you want. So I went and grabbed one, and it was a fuzzy Bible, and I opened it up, and it was a fuzzy animal that was a puzzle, and so I kept pulling things out. And then I looked, and it's like, it's time to start. And I'm supposed to open with a verse from my Bible, and all I've got is this fuzzy thing that's falling apart. And what am I supposed to do? And we've got all these kids, and I've got to find a place to send them. So I walked out to the barn, apparently, and opened the door. And you know what unattended kids do? Especially in a place like a barn, and in your dream you can just imagine everything there. Well, they were doing it, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we're going to need at least 4 teachers for this. And so I walk back, and you know how I joke with you at the beginning of the service how if you would all please take your seats, and you're already in your seats, so it's a non sequitur, it's a silly statement. Well, here I am trying to tell the people in the kitchen to please take their seats, and they're continuing talking, and the people in the bedroom, and it's like, Lord, what is going on? And then thankfully I woke up. All right, maybe that wouldn't be a nightmare to you, but it was a nightmare to me. And I remember it very well, and so much so that I told Kath, I never talk in the morning until I've drunk my coffee, and I actually talked to her and told her. So that was a nightmare. Now, why in the world would I share that with you after having read the sixth seal? Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 17. In my Bible that I have here, it has the sixth seal, terror. This that we read is a living nightmare. Living nightmare. Not a nightmare where I wake up and look for my coffee and my wife so I can share my nightmare with her. But no, this is a living nightmare such that people respond by seeking to die. What kind of terror does that? This week I watched a movie, I can't tell you the name because I don't know the name, I wouldn't recommend it anyway, but a father and the boyfriend of his daughter were going to travel from Chicago to Seattle where the daughter was, because all of a sudden everything went blank on the West Coast. And of course things like, oh, it was the Russians, or oh, it was the Chinese. But nobody knew anything because there was no communication. And then the electricity went out in Chicago. So these two traveled to the West Coast, a whole bunch of adventures, quote unquote adventures. They finally get to the West Coast and everybody's dead because there's been volcanic action, and so everything's covered with ash. And there's tremors, and where is the girlfriend? She found scratched on the door that she was out at this address out of the city, so he went there and found her. But I'm thinking a lot of these apocalyptic type movies usually have zombies or aliens. Okay, those are just silly. But the reason I share this one is that in the course of all of this, there's something that's real that's happening that's not aliens. It could be the Russians, it could be the Chinese, or it could just be what people term Mother Nature, which I don't like that term because it gives glory to somebody else. But, or is it just natural? Tidal waves, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes. Well, as I read chapter 6, starting in verse 12, I find that there is, the impression I have from reading verses 12, 13, and 14 is that the universe is coming apart. How do you describe the universe coming apart? Well, I mean, John does. That's what he's doing. He's describing the universe coming apart. We start out with a great earthquake. When Jesus broke the sixth seal, there's a great earthquake. And then things begun to happen that we have seen in previous verses and passages, both in the Old Testament and the New. And the sun became as black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon, or full moon, depending on how you interpret the word whole, hole in the Greek, the all, the full moon, the whole moon became like blood. So we have like sackcloth, black like sackcloth, like blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth like, or as, a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. And the sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, the sky itself, Kathy, you can ask her, she has it on her phone, a picture of the sky after Vandenberg blew something up, and then let it come down. And with the morning light shining on the contrails, it's just like, whoa! And it's a whoa type of picture. And you will be happy to show that. Okay, she'll be happy to show that to you. I didn't check with her before. And we've all seen the sky in various states. Sometimes we've seen multiple rainbows. We've seen cloud formations. We've seen responses to the contrails on the upper atmospheres. But I've never seen the sky split apart like a scroll being rolled up. Now, you could say, and there are those that say that, well, all this means is that men are really bad to each other, and Mother Nature doesn't like how man treats each other, so she responds. I mean, you get out there and you're going to hear all sorts of weird things. So the real basic question is this real? Is this really happening? Is there a great earthquake? Well, I didn't check this morning, but how many earthquakes have there been in the world today? I mean, even in California, I don't know. I think there's at least one a day. It doesn't have to mean it's big, but there's always an earthquake. There's always an earthquake. And sometimes there's big earthquakes, and we've had those here in California. Well, this one, there's a great earthquake. Doesn't surprise us. Jesus himself said in Matthew, I'm not going to be able to find it, I'll bet. Yeah, I can keep looking. I know I've got it somewhere. You know what? I'm not going to keep looking because I don't know where it is. Earthquakes. Jesus said there's going to be multiple earthquakes. So, and there's going to be other things. There's the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the powers of the heaven being shaken. That's what we get to in verse 13. But earth itself is shaking. Now, as I read this, I got a preemptive strike on my reading through the Bible this year. So this week I've completed up through Noah and the call of Abraham. But if you read Genesis 1, you find that God methodically puts the universe together. Like darkness, mass, separating the lights, calling the sun and the moon and the stars into existence, and they each have an appropriate place in the universe, something to do for us. So we find in chapter 1, he puts it all together. We find here in chapter 6 of Revelation, it's all beginning to come apart. We remember from chapters 4 and 5 when the living creatures and the elders and the angels and everybody's praising God, that they connect God with his creation. God isn't just removed out there, some ethereal thing that's on the other side of the universe, and we're inconveniently located here and he shows up from time to time. No, God is intimately acquainted and has a hand in not just our earth, but the universe. By him all things exist, and he holds all things together. So is it any surprise to us that in his wrath, he begins to deal with our own comfort zone? I mean, isn't our earth a comfort zone? Don't we, according to AOC and what's their name and what's his name and all those people that say we need to take care of Mother Earth because if we don't, we're all going to be dead by, 2030? They're not scientists, so don't worry about it. Those people know that something's happening to our earth. God knows something's happening to our earth because he's instrumental in dealing with it. So the sun turns black as sackcloth. Now that's, I find interesting, because if the sun loses its light, then what is the sun? What happened to the sun? Did all the gases all of a sudden explode and now there's nothing there? I don't know. Number one, I'm not a scientist, and number two, I can't even conceive of what it means that the sun turns black as sackcloth. I don't know. The moon turning to blood, I have a better image because we've seen the moon at various brightnesses and colors over our decades. So the moon becoming, the whole moon becoming as blood, has something to do with the atmosphere. Not sure what. I'm not sure anybody can really pinpoint. There's plenty of guesses. So if you have a guess, that's great. The stars of the sky falling to the earth. Now that one is interesting because we understand what stars are, and you do the math on stars, and I think Alpha Centauri is bigger than our entire solar system. So they're huge. So we can't have stars falling and hitting the earth because you just can't. But the word star, or astera, is a broad enough meaning to include a smaller object that hurtles through space from time to time. Can't be stars themselves because they are still in their place at the time of the fourth trumpet. So asteroids, call it meteorites. Meteorites come in all shapes and sizes, but this appears to be something that whatever's happening in the around the solar system, then colliding with our solar system and passing through certain things, so that Earth becomes the punching bag for the unraveling of the universe. We hit verse 14. The sky split apart like a scroll. And that again, if the sun is impacted and the moon is impacted and the smaller stars, the meteors, are impacting, then something's happening with the universe. And of course, how would we? Because we can define this, and we can define this, and we can define this with the Mars and Venus and the sun and us and the moon and so on. We can deal with that, but how do we deal with the sky splitting apart? I don't know. The fact that every mountain and island was removed from its place obviously shows that there's an impact upon terra firma. And to say every mountain and every island, I think, and it's one of the few times you'll hear me say it, is hyperbolic. I don't know if every island will disappear and then there will be totally new mountains. Although we do see that happening even today, not every, but there are new islands being added and other islands disappearing with variety of underground things happening. But there's no precedent either in the Old Testament or in apocalyptic literature that ever mentions it except here. So something is happening. Something is happening because we get to verses 15 through 17 and we have a response by these people. Who are these people? The kings of the earth. Kings of the earth are very easily understood as the highest rulers, the heads of state. Kings of the earth. What about the nobles and the commanders? Well, the nobles are always high-ranking government officials, and commanders are always military leaders. What about the rich and the strong? Well, the rich are usually the controllers of commerce in some capacity. And the strong could be people like our former governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, big muscles. but probably those who have a strong influence over many peoples. Then we have, those are all the upper class. Then we have the lower class. Every slave and free man. That's us. That's the peons of the world. The lower classes without significant influence anywhere. So how many people then do we have in verse 15? All of them. All the upper tier and all the lower tier. Everybody. What did they do? They hid themselves. They seek shelter from the collapse of the natural world. So if we say, or the scriptures say, they hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. I remember as a boy, the house is where you are, the sandbox is where I am. And of course, as a 3-4-year-old boy, the sandbox was the funnest place to be in the universe. And I did not know God at 3 years old, but I remember looking under, because we had a crawl space under the house and I could see it from the sandbox. And I remember looking in that crawl space and I said, I wonder if I crawled under there if God could see me. And even in my 3-year-old mind, without knowing who Jesus was or what salvation was, I said, if God is God, I'm pretty sure he could see me under there. So we have this problem where people, all the people, are trying to get away from whatever this phenomenon is. The kings, the commanders, the preeminent people, the wealthy, the strong, the slave, the free, they're trying to hide in my parlance, in the crawl spaces under the house, wherever they can get away, under the biggest tree if there's no mountain. So they have a response, and it is to run away and hide. And they call upon, and this has always impressed me for all the years I've ever read this book. And they say to the mountains and to the cliffs, fall upon us, hide us from the countenance and the face of the one sitting on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. I've always been impressed with people will do anything they can to not bow the knee to the living God. Even to the extent of looking for death so that they don't have to face God, which is almost mind-numbing. But I'm impressed with man's ability to run away from God and attempt to hide. They call upon nature to fall on us and hide us from the sight of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. That by itself is interesting because they recognize, there is a recognition here of the Son and the work that the Son accomplished. Somehow there's a recognition of his person and his work, but it's not saving faith. It is rejecting whatever the opposite of faith is. It's belief in unbelief. There's a rejection here, a phenomenal rejection. But they do recognize that the Lamb, interestingly enough, possesses wrath. We can understand the wrath of the lion, but keep in mind, we're not talking about the Lion of Judah here. We're talking about the Lamb, the one who had the horns and the one who was as slain, and the one who is opening these seals. He has a wrath. And it is the wrath is the fulfillment of the promises of God for judgment. There was a portion I didn't read in opening, but it was one of the options in Joshua 23. Joshua's about ready to, he tells the people, I'm about ready to die. And I just want to reiterate to you the promises of God. you will be blessed like crazy. But if you don't pay attention to God, you will be destroyed. Boy. So God is the God of love that the world thinks he is? Well, yeah, he is, but you have to understand his grace and mercy. Grace extended for the things you didn't accomplish, you don't deserve it. And mercy extended for the things you did do, for what you do deserve on the things you did. God's grace and mercy. God will respond to our response to his grace and mercy or rejection of it. So these people choose to chase after nature and nature's solutions rather than choose to look up and say, the ultimate solution provider, the sovereign of the universe. They won't do that. Interesting too that in verse 17 they say, for the great day of his wrath has come. The great day of his wrath has come. You know, again, if we go back all the way to Genesis, Cain was upset because God didn't accept his, rutabagas. But God had regard to Abel's sacrifice of a lamb. And God warned him. God warned him. And then Cain just did what he did, and God judged him. And we find the judgment of God again and again and again and again. And we find the promise of God that wrath is coming. The day of the Lord is coming. Don't be in that. Prepare not to be in that. And then we are now in that day of his wrath. The question that is asked, the last thing there, is who is able to stand? In essence, what the people are saying is, who can survive? And I read this and I go, I don't know who can survive. We can go back to Matthew 24 and say if the days hadn't been shortened, no one would survive. So we see here that God judges mankind, and a part of that judgment is judging mankind's house, his home, earth. God formed it. God made it. He put Adam and Eve into the garden in order to facilitate, quote unquote, heaven on earth. Adam and Eve, probably were there for 24 hours, maybe 48. Horrible thought. So they didn't accomplish anything except naming the animals, and I think Adam did that before Eve showed up. So the world has been groaning. The world itself, God's creation, is waiting for God to complete it, because this world is not completed. And in fact, we see here that it is unraveling. So we see God's wrath coming in the second part of this, or identified rather, in the second part, where part of God's judgment upon the world, the cup of God's wrath, tired of mankind. Go back and read, I think it's Genesis 6, how the Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and only 8 people out of the who knows how many millions on the face of the earth were saved, because there was only 8 who looked up and recognized the capital S sovereign of the universe. And the world was corrupt, and God repented of having made man and finally found somebody righteous and entered the boat, closed the door, saved those. And part of the understanding as we close down for today is to recognize that, again, we can go back to 1 Thessalonians, God did not prepare us for his wrath. He prepared us to be saved. How does that come about? By looking at the accomplishment of what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross as Emmanuel, as God with us, who bore our sin upon himself and died in our place while we were yet sinners. That is God's grace. That is God's redemptive plan. All promises fulfilled in his resurrection so that we can have them fulfilled. I should say that a little different. The plan of redemption was fulfilled in him. The completion is when we are on the other side. And then the total completion is after the great white throne judgment, and then it's all done. It's all over, including the shouting. So we conclude with the sixth seal. Chapter 7 will have an interlude. We'll see that there's an interlude so that we can take a breath from the midst of God's judgments, and we can recognize that we are slowly, inexorably moving toward the end. A few of you have notes on the back that says, when will this sixth seal happen? The sixth seal is not the end. It is not the end, even though Jesus said after the tribulation of those days. What this is this is an advance of the very end. We will find that in, I must have given somebody my notes. I did, because I had mine marked. So if you have them, you know what I was looking at. The great earthquake is in Revelation chapter 16, verse 18. And there will be flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. And there will be a great earthquake such as there had not been since man came upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. In other words, this, what we see here, which brings terror upon the earth, is still only the first promise fulfilled. There's more to come. There's more earthquake. There's more events. In fact, as the further we get into Revelation, we're going to start to see it goes from natural and physical to supernatural and spiritual, where the demon world is opened up upon the earth. But we're not there yet. So, again, Jesus Christ provided our salvation. He did not prepare us for wrath. He prepared us to be saved, to be taken out, away from it. But God is just and righteous, and he has to accomplish what he has to accomplish with regards to judgment. That's it for today. To the glory of God. Father, you're good all the time. And even though if someone without faith was looking in this saying, how can we call this good? Father, the fact that you have given this to us, we have the ability to look and to prepare and to make sure we will not be here for this. We have that opportunity by looking at Jesus and saying, he is my only means of being removed from God's wrath. We have that. It's called grace. So, Father, may we recognize your goodness, and may we move forward in your goodness to make sure we share your goodness with others so that they indeed will not have to go through your wrath. As we face another year, with 2024 just around the corner, may we be prepared to follow you, for you certainly have promised to guide and direct us. So we commit our way to you now. In the name of the Master, Jesus Christ. Amen.